guys, and welcome to the newest video here on the channel. I wanted to kind of address something on the channel today that I haven't actually talked about previously, which is the topic of anime, which is something until a couple years ago I had no particular interest in and very little exposure to, but have since, seen quite a bit of it, have some fairly strong opinions about it, and, some favorites of mine that I kind of just wanted to discuss in brief, and then also kind of pose some questions to you. Before I do that, I did get something kind of cool. I've been playing God of War, as I mentioned in my last video. I'm quite a ways into it, and I really want to talk about that once I beat it. Based on my first impressions, I can say my impression remains the same. It's a fantastic game, but I'll give some more of my overall thoughts when I'm actually complete with it. But I did get the collector's edition, and with that came this, which is this awesome little statue figure, whatever you want to call it, of Kratos and Atreus from the game. And, I'm not a big person on collectible items like this. I don't get the pop vinyls. I never even got into like amiibos and stuff like that. I don't know. I have no issue with them, but they're not really my cup of tea necessarily. But I was so hyped for this game, I just went ahead and got the collector's edition and kind of figured this would be some cruddy little, 3-inch high statue thing. But this is actually pretty huge, very detailed, and really cool. And like I said, I'm enjoying the game so much that I'm, kind of excited to have this now because of the very few things like this I have. This is one game that I think I'll be glad I have something from. So just wanted to give a shout out to the makers of this. I'm not sure who the actual designers of the figurines are, but Santa Monica Studio made the game, and like I said, I've been loving that. So I just wanted to kind of briefly show that off. Now to the topic at hand, which is anime as a whole. My history with anime is such that until about 5 years ago, the fullest extent I had seen of any anime was watching Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z as a kid. And, my initial watch through, of those two series was literally when I was in 5th through like 7th grade. So we're talking 15, 20 years ago at this point when I initially saw that, which I enjoyed as a kid, but never really had much interest in, watching more of as I've gotten older, Dragon Ball GT or Dragon Ball Super that's on now. They were entertaining shows, but they were something that I sort of just stopped caring much about over time and didn't think a whole lot about beyond that. But I've always been a really, really big fan of Japanese culture, Japanese culture at large, but also Japanese art and media. Lots of video games, JRPGs are probably my favorite genre. Japanese style art, whether it be the old Japanese woodblock art or just Japanese aesthetics in general. So it was always kind of interesting to me that I was never that into anime because you'd think, being such a big fan of Japanese media and also, a big fan of Japanese gaming, that anime might kind of fall into the category of something that I was innately drawn to. But it always just kind of seemed to me, from the little I saw in previews and whatnot, to be a little bit too ridiculous, a little bit too over the top, just not something was really all that interested in checking out. And really, I'm just not all that big a fan, or I'm not that avid a watcher of animated television or movies in general. Being such a big movie fan and such a big gaming fan, I certainly do have a respect for animated films and animated television, but I haven't seen a whole ton. It's just something about it. I think some of my favorite aspects of movies have to deal with, the human actors portraying the characters, and such a big part of why I love gaming is the element of you controlling the characters as a player. So in animated film and television, you kind of remove those two aspects and you're left with something that I was just never all that enthralled by. Certainly, there are animated works that I really enjoyed, but I'm just not a big animated person. I don't see a lot of animated films in theaters, don't really watch a whole lot in general, so I kind of had that roadblock in my way for getting into anime to begin with. But a couple years back, I kind of heard an increasingly large number of real positive reviews and real strong reviews about a lot of anime, primarily some Studio Ghibli stuff and Miyazaki stuff, which going to film school and being around people who were really into those movies, films, and television as they came out was hard to kind of completely steer away from. So a couple years ago, I kind of finally dove in and decided to give a try a lot of these movies and shows that people had recommended. And started off watching some of the things that are considered real classics like Princess Mononoke and Spirited Away, both of which I really loved and absolutely love the aesthetic of, love the imagination and color and gorgeous detail that both films feature. Neither was really something that I completely was, over the moon about. I had always heard about how incredible the narrative in both were, and I thought both were really, really interesting and really, really well done. But I really enjoyed the aesthetic and, the animation itself more so than the story that either of those told. But in the last couple of years, I've also started watching series with a friend of mine who's really into anime, and he's kind of, recommended some for me to check out. And I wanted to just kind of briefly touch on some of the ones we've watched so far and some of the ones we plan on watching. To get your feedback to see kind of what you think of these anime, and also recommend others that might be similar or might be a nice change of pace from these. So the first I ever watched was Fullmetal Alchemist, the original series, and then followed that up with Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood. And I thought those were both great. I thought those were both a really nice mix of dramatic weight with interesting fight sequences, with imaginative characters and an imaginative story. I was drawn to it in the first place because what I knew about it and what I knew about Ed and Al's story, and it was fairly tragic and fairly dark, which drew me to it because I wanted something that was not quite as lighthearted and a little bit more serious. But along with the serious moments of both those series, you do get still a really nice mix of cool alchemy powers and these awesome fight sequences, some really cool characters. Obviously the two series kind of go in different directions, but it was a really nice mix of some of the more colorful, imaginative, and bonkers elements of anime with some actual weighty, interesting, sort of poignant narrative elements, which is something I really wanted to find a balance of. So I enjoyed that enough. I enjoyed both those series enough that I said, I wouldn't mind checking out some more series that people talk really highly about and see, kind of how I feel. So we segued from that into watching Attack on Titan, which we've now seen up through, the most recently available episodes. And again, really loved that. I felt like that was kind of dragging until they got into the sequences where they lured the Titans into the woods, and Levi has the big fight with the female Titan. And then I was just so blown away by the way they presented the fight sequences in that, and the level of violence and just complete insanity that those fights reach. And that really just kind of caught me off guard. Thought it was completely awesome. And from that, the series really kind of ramped up to some really awesome action sequences, some brilliantly choreographed fights, and some real weight in that too, because, tons of significant characters die. The violence is fairly brutal. It's really a no-holds-barred kind of show, which I like, because if you're doing a topic like that, mankind versus these human-eating creatures, you really can't pull any punches when it comes to the violence and things like that, which the show doesn't. So I really enjoyed that. I'm definitely more into that for the action than, the narrative per se, but I really have enjoyed that. We've since gone on from Attack on Titan to watch Death Note, which I thought was brilliant because it got a little bit away from these more action fantasy heavy anime into a more cat and mouse, psychological thriller style show, which I absolutely loved. The mind games between Light and L, and the whole way that plays out. Thought was really, really well done, and was a nice change of pace for the more fantastical anime we had watched previously. We've watched Trigun, which I thought the story of Trigun, the overarching narrative, left a lot of things kind of unanswered for me, and I didn't really follow some of what was sort of the backstory that Trigun dealt with. But loved the atmosphere, found the characters really endearing, it was just a really fun, enjoyable show, even though I didn't think, it came full circle quite enough for me, but still really enjoyed watching it. And it was a nice change of pace again with sort of the more Western, spacey theme. We've also watched Terror and Resonance, which we just recently finished, which is a modern day set anime. Again, a really nice change of pace because you have things like Fullmetal Alchemist and Attack on Titan that are fight scene heavy and combat heavy. Terror and Resonance is, a modern day terrorist detective story, social commentary anime. So that was another that I felt like might not have provided quite enough in the way of character development for me to feel like it reached its full potential. But fantastic music, fantastic animation, really interesting, and another nice change of pace from stuff we had watched previously. We watched Berserk at my recommendation, which was completely insane. Berserk's one of those shows that all I had heard is, if you think you've seen truly mature, adult-themed animation and material before, you haven't seen anything yet. And I kept thinking, how gory, how crazy could this show really be? And then as it went on and on and on, it got so bloody, so graphic in terms of sexuality, just so over the top, which I loved because that's what I was looking for going in, and it absolutely delivered. Especially the last episode we watched the Golden Arc film trilogy, not the original series or the new series, but the Golden Arc film trilogy. And by the end, sort of the final sequence was one of the bloodiest, grossest, most insane things I've seen in any medium before, which I absolutely loved. And I do plan to watch the new 2016 animated series, which picks up from the end of that. So, that was really a treat too. But, from a couple years ago, I went from my only exposure to anime being Dragon Ball, and now I've seen a couple Studio Ghibli films, all the series I just mentioned, which kind of run the gamut from ultraviolet medieval to spacey western to modern day terrorist story. And it's really kind of shown me that anime is a bit broader than I ever really thought it was. There's certain tropes that exist, sort of the goofy, over-the-top, awkward humor finds a way into almost every anime, regardless of what the setting is or what the story is even about. Kind of character interactions, particularly the way they depict female characters, tends to be another issue that you see a lot in anime with just some very stereotypical elements. But by and large, it's opened my eyes to the fact that anime can be as artistically relevant, artistically expressive, beautifully realized as any other art form, and really run the gamut from a wide range of tonal styles, art styles, narrative styles, and that's really made me a bigger fan of anime than I expected to be. So right now we just started watching Trinity Blood, which is kind of cool because I didn't realize the main character of that's voiced by Troy Baker, who did Joel in The Last of Us, who did Ocelot in The Phantom Pain, and is a really great voice actor. So by and large, I just kind of wanted to make this to break up, videos solely about gaming, but also just because, anime has sort of become a hobby now, an interest of mine that a couple of years ago I really didn't ever see happening. And now I'm kind of excited to explore a lot of the other highly regarded anime, both films and series, because it's really opened my eyes to the fact that it could be something more than I, really thought it could. So if you watch this and have any interest in anime, what are some of your favorite anime? Based on the ones I mentioned that I've already seen, could you recommend others I might like because I liked those? I'm open to stuff that's more action and fantasy heavy or more grounded and dramatic. I'm really just open to explore stuff that might open my eyes and broaden my horizons. So anime, I didn't think I'd like it, but I actually really enjoy it. And it's proven yet again that the Japanese have completely insane imaginations that I personally just love. So thanks for checking this out, guys. When I beat God of War, I'll probably make a video on that. Dark Lord Day is coming up, so I'll probably make another video on that before we go. And it's been fun making videos again. So thanks for checking this out. Let me know if you have any strong feelings about anime one way or another, and I'll talk to you guys next time.